So today, we're going to dive into one of the most complicated and frankly polarizing legal sagas in the history of Hollywood. We're talking about the director Roman Polanski. It is a story that weaves together incredible art, a serious crime, and a justice system that people have been arguing about for almost 50 years. And that really gets to the heart of the matter, right? How is it possible that one of the most celebrated filmmakers in the world is also at the same time a fugitive from American justice? To even begin to understand that, you've got to go all the way back to the start. Here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the actual case back in 1977, then look at the plea deal and why Polanski fled. Super important, we'll hear from the victim, Samantha Geimer, in her own words. After that, we'll trace his life on the run, dig into the huge debate his case has always sparked, and then finally, we'll look at what his legacy means today. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's March 1977. Roman Polanski is 43 years old, and he's this world-famous, Oscar-nominated director. Samantha Geimer is a 13-year-old girl working as a model. Their worlds are about to collide in a way that would create ripples for decades to come. So, what happened? Well, the setting was a photo shoot for French Vogue, and it was happening at Jack Nicholson's house in LA. According to the grand jury testimony from the time, Polanski gave Geimer champagne and part of a quaalude, which is a sedative, before he sexually assaulted her. And this is where the legal maneuvering really kicks in. Initially, Polanski was hit with a 6-count indictment for some very serious felonies. We're talking raped by use of drugs, sodomy, the whole thing. But through a plea bargain, all of that was reduced to just one single lesser charge: unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. He pleaded guilty to that. Now, you might think a plea deal would be the end of the story, but in this case, it was the complete opposite. It wasn't the resolution, it was the catalyst for Polanski's disappearance and the beginning of his life as a fugitive. Things just moved incredibly fast after that. He takes the plea deal in August. By December, he's sent to a state prison for what was supposed to be a 90-day psychiatric evaluation. He gets out after just 42 days. And then, literally hours before he was supposed to show up in court for his final sentencing, he gets on a plane and leaves the United States for good. So this is the million-dollar question. Why did he run? Well, it all came down to the deal. His lawyers were absolutely convinced the deal was for time served, meaning those 42 days he already did would be the entire sentence. But word got back to Polanski that the judge, a man named Lawrence Rittenband, was planning to tear up that deal and give him a much longer sentence, maybe up to 50 years. Facing that, he fled. Of course, we cannot have this conversation without centering the voice of the victim, Samantha Geimer. Her perspective is absolutely essential, and she has been a powerful, if sometimes reluctant, voice in this debate for her entire life. And her own words are just so powerful on this. She has said over and over again that the media circus, the court battles, the public scrutiny, that ordeal became a trauma all on its own, one that was even bigger and more damaging to her and her family than the assault itself. Now, there was a financial side to this, too. In 1988, Geimer sued Polanski in civil court. They eventually settled in 1993 for a confidential amount, which court documents later showed was $500,000. But it's worth noting those same documents suggested he was pretty slow to actually pay it. Over the decades, Geimer's position has become, incredibly nuanced. By 2008, she was saying she had forgiven him and that she just wanted to move on. In fact, she has repeatedly asked the LA court system to just dismiss the case entirely, arguing that keeping it going only serves to re-traumatize her. So while Samantha Geimer was trying to find some kind of closure, Roman Polanski was living a totally different reality as an international fugitive. He managed to continue making award-winning films, but he could never, ever come back to the United States. So how did he do it? How did he evade U.S. justice for so long? Well, the answer is pretty simple. His passport. He's a citizen of both France and Poland, and he spent most of his time in countries that have laws preventing them from extraditing their own citizens to the U.S. It essentially created a legal safe zone for him. But his freedom wasn't bulletproof, and in 2009, his luck seemed to run out. He was traveling to Zurich, Switzerland, to get a Lifetime Achievement Award at a film festival, and boom, he was arrested on that old 1978 warrant. He was put under house arrest, and the whole world was watching, thinking, is this it? Is he finally going back to the U.S.? But no, in the end, he wasn't extradited. The Swiss government refused the U.S. request, and their reasoning was pretty specific. They said that U.S. officials hadn't provided them with key documents, including testimony that might have cleared up what that original plea deal actually was. Without being sure if the 42 days he'd served was his full sentence or not, the Swiss basically said the whole request was on shaky legal ground. And that arrest in Zurich, it just blew the lid off this huge global debate all over again. The public, the film industry, everyone was split right down the middle. It really came down to one question. Does being an artistic genius mean you get a pass? Or should the law apply to everyone no matter what? On one side, you had over 160 big names in the film industry, directors, actors, you name it. They signed a petition demanding his release. Their argument was that it was just wrong to use a cultural event, a festival honoring his life's work, as what they called a police trap. But then, on the complete other side of the coin, you had people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the governor of California at the time. His view was crystal clear. It doesn't matter who you are, the law is the law. Famous director, famous actor, it shouldn't make a difference. And that debate really brings us right up to the present day, because this case is anything but ancient history. It's still an active, unfolding story, with new legal developments and cultural shockwaves still happening. I mean, the story is still being written. Just a few years ago, in 2015, Poland also denied a U.S. request to extradite him. But then, in 2018, in the midst of the #MeToo movement, the Academy, the very same organization that gave him the Oscar for Best Director, kicked him out. And, as recently as this year, a totally separate civil case, this one for an alleged assault back in 1973, was settled. When you step back and look at it all, you realize this case is about so much more than one man. It's become this cultural flashpoint that forces us to ask really uncomfortable questions. Can you separate the art from the artist? And what does justice even look like when it has to cross international borders and span across multiple decades? Which leaves us all with this final, really tough, unanswered question. Almost 50 years later, with the victim herself asking for the case to be dropped and the perpetrator still working as a celebrated artist, what does justice actually mean here? There really are no easy answers.